Why, hello, everybody. You might know that Tom Richardson normally does these reviews for his channel, but it's me, Frank, and I'm going to be doing the review today instead. But you're probably wondering, where did Tom Richardson go? And who's holding this paper up right now? Well, I better get out of here so he can review this movie instead.
So hey everybody, Frank in the movie actually does not sound like that at all. That was more so Frank Sidebottom, who is kind of the inspiration for this Frank character in the indie film Frank that I'm going to review for you today. So Frank Sidebottom, he looked more so like this. But Michael Fassbender's Frank character in the movie does have a mask that does look very similar to that as well. Hope you liked my little drawing there. That actually was drawn by me of the Frank mask. So, in the film Frank, you guys, basically it's about a character played by Domhnall Gleeson. You might know his father, who was Mad Eye Moody in the Harry Potter films, and he was also the general that Tom Cruise kind of had a grudge against in Edge of Tomorrow. For those who saw that recently, he's been in a couple of other stuff, like he was in Green Zone, for example, and stuff like that. But this is his son, who's also been in Harry Potter films. He was in the seventh and eighth film, I believe, as one of the older Weasley brothers. And I think he was also in About Time with Rachel McAdams. So he's been in a couple of other stuff. But he plays a musician in this who specializes in keyboard music and the piano keyboard. And he likes to write songs himself. And he's trying to kind of get up and going with this amateur musician career, and it's not really going anywhere. And so what he hears about is kind of this opportunity where this other small band that's kind of small like him, they need another keyboard person. They're down one, and they really need one for the music that they're trying to make. This other band also is in the process of currently making one of their first albums. I think it's not their very first album, but it's one of their first. And so basically, the Domhnall Gleeson musician views this as his opportunity to kind of get involved with music, get involved with somebody who actually has their foot in the door and actually has a music career going on. So he gets a part of this band, and he notices right away that there's a band member who's kind of the lead singer, kind of the, creative force behind the band. His name is Frank, and kind of like you saw earlier with the little mask that I showed you. Um, he wears this all the time. Frank never takes the mask off. His band has stories about, how they've tried to convince him to take it off, and how he eats, and how he showers, and how he bathes, and how he, performs sex and stuff like that. And it's quite clear that Frank has a mental illness of some kind. And this mental illness, for some odd reason, kind of forces him to wear this mask all the time. There's something about the mask that kind of comforts him, give him more confidence in himself, and there's just something in between the lines that you obviously learn throughout the film why it's so important to him, why he's always wearing this mask all the time. So Domhnall Gleeson's trying to make it big with this band, and kind of like him, that this band really isn't going anywhere. They say that they're working on their new album, that they're trying to make creative songs to put on this album, but in all honesty, what they're really doing is just kind of goofing off and kind of getting off topic a lot with songs that they can use for the band. It's quite clear that none of them have any type of ideas that they can use for songs, so they're just kind of goofing off and hoping to get inspiration for these songs. And it's just this band over the several course of several months, trying to make it big at bars and places that had open mic nights for bands. And it's really about this band really trying to figure out how they can really get this album together that they've been planning this whole time, how they can kind of get Frank out of this mental illness state where he always feels like he has to wear this mask all the time. And they also run into some financial issues as far as where they rented out this place to, get creative inspiration for this album and things like that. So the film is kind of a little bit about all those things. So that's what really Frank is all about in a nutshell, to be honest. So for my positives and negatives of Frank, you guys, it does have a lot to say about mental illness. With Frank wearing the mask all the time, and other characters also suffering from things that they admit to each other of problems that they have. It really just has a lot to say about mental illness and how some of these people really feel confident with certain things and feel comfortable with certain things, and when they have those things taken away, it really just kind of hurts them in more ways than you would think. So The film is also very unique and very bizarre. So for those who like films like, let's say, by Terry Gilliam or Wes Anderson or David Lynch or any of those guys that really make kind of really weird kind of movies, Frank is definitely up there. It's very unique. It's very bizarre, but in a good kind of way. I think it's a good, unique, and it's bizarre. It's kind of like the Frank Zybottom comedic singer in real life. I mean, he very much had a sense of humor where you don't really quite know if you want to laugh at him or, you're just kind of like, this is just kind of weird. So the film definitely has that kind of feeling towards it. So I also think Frank is the perfect kind of, and I'll obviously get into a minute here, as far as me recommending the film and things like that. But I do think Frank is a good rental. I do think, it's still on iTunes, and that's actually how I saw it. I rented it on iTunes. I think it's a good rental. I think it's a good, film to say that you've experienced, a film that really does have a lot to say about mental illness and things like that. It's not really quite a film that I could see myself going back to several times. I think that's what kind of hurts Frank a little bit, is it really doesn't have a lot of replay value behind it. So for those who are hoping for a Frank film where, we could watch it several times, and, it really represents really references the life of Frank Sidebottom really well. Unfortunately, this really isn't quite that movie. It's a like I said, it's a good one-time rental kind of movie. Domhnall Gleeson's performance, I think, was obviously the most notable part of the movie for me, even more so than Michael Fassbender's Frank character. I really thought the Domhnall Gleeson character, really wanted to make it big, really wanted to do something big with this band. He really had, a big goal in mind, and it was just kind of interesting to see kind of how he approached that. He was blogging throughout the movie on this online blog on Twitter that he was making of kind of his experience with this band and working with Frank that everybody knows of, and just a really good performance from him, I thought. Apparently, he's going to be in Star Wars Episode 7, so this is definitely a role where, if he's very good in this, I'm very curious to see how he's going to do in that future Star Wars film that's been in development for a while now. I'd also go so far to say as Frank does have a lot of several original elements about it. It's definitely a film where you'll watch it and you really can't think of a lot of films that feel like this, that really don't. It really doesn't feel like something that's a ripoff of something else, or the millionth Dracula film or the millionth Transformers film. It's really its own movie, and I think that's one thing that Frank does have going for it. Is it really does feel like something we've never experienced before, and I really like that feeling of Frank. For my negatives of Frank, and they're actually quite drastic ones for the negatives, really not a lot happens in this film. And I think that's one thing that really wears Frank down, is it really only has like three or four, more so three, big events that happen. And then it just kind of wanders around a lot. It doesn't really get a lot done. It's definitely not a film where a lot of things happen, I'll tell you that much. But it just really doesn't go right anywhere. It just kind of gets one or two or three things done, and then it just kind of meanders throughout the rest of the runtime. So really not a lot happens in this film, unfortunately. For being this band that's trying to make it big, Frank does have a very dull sense of music. I know it's trying to represent that, this Frank character has a mental illness, and so does a lot of these people in this band. But I think because the movie is so music heavy, I really would have liked to have seen something that really feels, something that we could get into. And unfortunately, Frank just doesn't have a very good musical score, and that's really unfortunate because this is a music-heavy film, and you would think with being a music-heavy film, they would really want to make sure the music is really quite good in it, and unfortunately, it isn't. I would also go far to saying this goes back to me saying that not a lot happens in Frank. There really isn't enough conflict in Frank either. I mean, there's just one or two little small things that happen, and then the rest is like, oh well, we don't know what to do for a conflict now. Because they get the conflict resolved so quickly when they do happen. So, unfortunately, not a lot of conflict in Frank, and that's another thing that really wears it down. And then my last negative about Frank is it does have a very dull sense of humor. Kind of like Frank Sidebottom, you'll watch and be like, okay, that's kind of funny, and then you're just kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird. Um, but overall, I would say there was more times where I was keeping a straight face while watching it than actually laughing out loud, which is what I was hoping Frank was going to be based off the trailers. Unfortunately, the trailers kind of give away a lot of the good humorous stuff. And by the time you're done watching the film, you're just like, you know what? I really didn't laugh a lot in this movie. So overall, I'm giving Frank a 7.5 out of 10. I do think it's a good rental, but I don't think it's quite a good film to own or to watch several times over again. I think it's just one of those films where you'll watch it once, you'll enjoy it for experiencing it for what it was, you'll enjoy it for the originality behind it. But overall, I really can't see myself watching this several times again. And like I said, there's just a lot of negatives going for it that really kind of wear it down to what could have been a really well done movie. And unfortunately, it just ends up being an okay film. So Frank is okay. I can't give it a thumbs up, but I can't give it a thumbs down. It's right in the middle somewhere, and that's kind of where I'm going for with the whole it's a good rental kind of film. So for those who are planning on watching Frank, definitely just rent it. Don't buy it. So if you want to see it, feel free to rent it. If you really don't kind of care and it really doesn't sound like a film that interests you, you can feel free to skip it. It really isn't that urgent, I don't think. So Frank, it's an okay film.